You're about to step inside America's most haunted prison, where screams still echo through empty cells and shadows move on their own. Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia isn't just any abandoned building. This is where the most dangerous criminals in history face something far worse than punishment. They face total isolation, and many say their tortured souls never left. What you're about to discover will change how you think about the paranormal forever. Picture this, it's 1829 in Philadelphia. Workers just finished building the most expensive structure in American history. Not the White House, not a grand cathedral, a prison. Eastern State Penitentiary cost more money than any public building ever constructed in the United States. The massive stone walls stood 30 feet high and went 10 feet deep underground. Those medieval-looking towers? Pure intimidation. The architects wanted criminals to see this place and feel dread before they even walk through the gates. And it worked. Even today, something about those crumbling walls makes your skin crawl. Maybe it's the architecture, or maybe it's the 75,000 souls who suffered inside for 142 years. The prison opened with a radical new idea called the Pennsylvania system. Forget beating prisoners or public humiliation. The Quaker reformers behind this place believed in something they thought was more humane: complete and total solitary confinement. Every prisoner got their own cell with running water, central heating, and a flushing toilet. Sounds nice, right? Here's the twisted part. Prisoners spent 23 hours per day alone in those cells. No talking, no visitors, no contact with other humans except guards and the warden. When they moved through the prison, guards forced black hoods over their heads so they couldn't see or be seen by anyone. The goal? Break them mentally until they felt true regret for their crimes. The reality, it drove people completely insane. Famous visitors from around the world came to marvel at this experiment. Writer Charles Dickens toured Eastern State in 1842 and was horrified. He called it cruel and wrong, saying the isolation was worse than any physical torture. He was right. By 1913, the prison officially gave up on solitary confinement because overcrowding made it impossible, and the psychological damage was undeniable. But the damage was already done. Decades of suffering had soaked into those walls, and according to hundreds of witnesses, that suffering never left. Al Capone was America's most feared gangster. He ordered brutal hits, ran Chicago's underworld, and made millions during Prohibition. Nothing scared him, until he spent 8 months at Eastern State Penitentiary. In 1929, police arrested Capone in Philadelphia for carrying a concealed weapon. It was his first time behind bars. Prison officials knew exactly who they had, so they gave Capone special treatment. Cellblock 7 became his luxury apartment. Fine furniture, oil paintings on the walls, a fancy cabinet radio, even a Persian rug. Other prisoners lived in cold concrete cells while Capone basically had a hotel suite. But money couldn't protect him from what happened at night. Other inmates and guards reported hearing Capone screaming in the darkness, blood-curdling screams. He would beg and plead with someone named Jimmy to leave him alone. Who was Jimmy? James Clark, a low-level mobster killed in the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. On February 14, 1929, 7 men were lined up against a wall in a Chicago garage and machine-gunned to death. Everyone knew Capone ordered the hit, even though he was never convicted. Jimmy Clark was one of those 7 men. Now Jimmy's ghost was getting revenge. Capone swore someone invisible shared his cell. He would have entire conversations with empty air in the middle of the night. Some prisoners thought he was losing his mind. But here's the thing. When Capone finally left Eastern State, the haunting followed him. The spirit of Jimmy Clark tormented him for years. Capone even hired psychics to make the ghost go away. Nothing worked. By the end of his life, Capone's mental state had completely deteriorated. Was it the disease eating his brain, or had Jimmy Clark finally driven him mad? We'll never know for sure, but one thing is certain. Whatever Capone experienced in that cell changed him forever. Today, visitors to Al Capone's cell report strange feelings. Cold spots appear out of nowhere. Some people hear whispers in empty hallways. A few brave souls claim they have heard screaming late at night, just like the other inmates described almost 100 years ago. Maybe Capone's fear left an imprint, or maybe Jimmy Clark is still waiting in that cell for his next victim. Let's talk about Willie Sutton. This guy was a legend. They called him Slick Willie and the Actor because he robbed banks wearing elaborate disguises. Police officers, mailmen, window washers. He played every role perfectly, and stole an estimated $2 million during his 40-year career. In 1934, authorities sentenced him to 25 to 50 years at Eastern State for a machine gun robbery. Sutton was charming, intelligent, and absolutely determined to escape. He tried 5 times at Eastern State, 5 times, but the escape that made history happened in 1945, and it took an entire year to pull off. Sutton teamed up with 11 other inmates, including a guy named Clarence Kleinedienst, who was a mason and plasterer. Kleiny, as everyone called him, was a prison scavenger genius. Sutton once joked that if you gave Kleiny 2 weeks, he could get you anything. Give him a year, and he'd get you out of prison. That's exactly what he did. Working in 2-man teams during 30-minute shifts, the group used spoons and flattened cans as digging tools. First, they broke through the wall of cell 68. Then they dug straight down 12 feet into the earth. Then they tunneled 97 feet horizontally under the prison walls. The entire tunnel was only 31 inches wide, barely enough room to crawl through. Halfway through, they even connected it to the prison's sewer system to dump dirt and keep toxic fumes out. It was brilliant criminal engineering, and somehow the guards never found it. The escapees hid the entrance behind a fake plaster panel that matched the cell wall perfectly, concealed by a metal trash basket. On April 3, 1945, all 12 men crawled through that tunnel to freedom. But freedom didn't last long for most of them. Some were caught within minutes. Others lasted weeks or months. Sutton himself got recaptured on the day of the escape. Only one man from all the escape attempts in Eastern State's history stayed free forever. His name was Leo Callahan. In 1923, he climbed over the wall and vanished. Nobody ever saw or heard from him again. During renovations in the 1930s, workers discovered over 30 incomplete inmate-dug tunnels throughout the prison. Turns out everyone was trying to escape this nightmare. Here's a story that sounds fake, but it's completely true. In 1924, a black Labrador retriever named Pep became an official inmate at Eastern State Penitentiary. Prison records assigned him inmate number C2559. They took his mugshot, they wrote murder as his crime in the intake logs, and sentenced him to life in prison. The legend says Pep attacked and ended the life of Pennsylvania Governor Gifford Pinchot's wife's beloved cat, so the governor used his power to send the dog to prison. The real story is somehow weirder. Governor Pinchot actually donated Pep as a therapy dog to boost inmate morale. The prison was massively overcrowded by the 1920s. Originally designed for 250 prisoners, Eastern State held over 1,700 people by 1926. Conditions were terrible and the warden needed something to improve morale. So Pinchot sent Pep as a missionary to help with prisoner rehabilitation. The murder charge and mugshot were meant as a joke, but when newspapers got the story, they ran with the cat murder angle. It became national news. People around the world sent angry letters to the governor, furious that he would imprison an innocent dog. Governor Pinchot and his wife had to repeatedly tell the press that Pep never harmed any cat, but the legend stuck. Pep spent about 2 years at Eastern State before transferring to Graterford Prison, where he lived out his days. Prisoners and staff loved him. He had free rein to roam wherever he wanted, and apparently he still does. Multiple witnesses over the years report seeing and hearing a dog inside the prison, paw prints in the dust, barking echoing through empty cell blocks. The ghost of Pep apparently enjoys his afterlife behind bars. At least somebody's happy here. If you're looking for America's most haunted location, Eastern State Penitentiary is at the top of the list. Reports of paranormal activity go back to the 1940s, when the prison was still operating. Guards and inmates describe shadowy figures, disembodied voices, and overwhelming feelings of dread in certain areas. After the prison closed in 1971, those reports exploded. The building sat abandoned for nearly 20 years. Vandals broke in. Trees grew inside the cell blocks. A colony of stray cats made it their home. The city of Philadelphia wanted to tear it down and build a shopping mall, but a group of preservationists fought to save it, and in '90, Eastern State opened as a historic site and museum. That's when things got really interesting. Cellblock 12 is famous for cackling laughter and echoing voices when nobody's there. Cellblock 6 is known for dark shadows that dart along the walls and vanish into cells. Cellblock 4 might be the most active. Visitors and staff report seeing ghostly faces appear in the walls. But the most famous paranormal encounter happened to a locksmith named Gary Johnson in the early 1990s during restoration work. Johnson was trying to remove an old lock from a cell door in cell block 4. Suddenly, an invisible force grabbed him so tight he couldn't move. He described it as a horrible negative energy that exploded out of the cell. Then tormented faces materialized on the walls around him. One figure in particular reached out toward him. Johnson was terrified. He's far from the only witness. Paranormal investigation shows have captured incredible evidence here. Ghost hunters filmed a shadowy figure moving along the catwalk in cell block 4. The footage shows something dark crawling across the floor, then standing up and bolting down the hallway. The investigators couldn't explain it through any natural means. MTV's Fear, Ghost Adventures, and Most Haunted Live all filmed episodes at Eastern State. Equipment malfunctions happen constantly during investigations. Batteries drain instantly. Cameras shut off for no reason. Temperature drops of 20 degrees occur in seconds. Visitors report being touched by invisible hands, hearing whispers in their ears, and feeling watched by something malicious. Even the tour guides, many of whom don't believe in ghosts, admit that something strange happens in this place. You can feel the suffering that happened here. It's in the air, in the walls, in every dark corner and empty cell. Eastern State finally closed its doors as a prison in 1971. Over its 142 years of operation, it held approximately 75,000 people. Many died here from disease, violence, and despair. The harsh punishments used at Eastern State are nightmare fuel. The water bath, where inmates were dunked in freezing water, then chained to exterior walls in winter until ice formed on their skin. The mad chair, which bound prisoners so tightly their circulation stopped and limbs had to be removed. The iron gag, which strapped an inmate's hands behind their back and connected them to an iron collar in their mouth. Any movement caused their tongue to tear and bleed. These weren't medieval torture devices. This happened in America less than 100 years ago. Eastern State stands today as a stabilized ruin. The crumbling walls, peeling paint, and rusted cell doors create an atmosphere unlike anywhere else in America. It's a photographer's dream and a paranormal investigator's playground. Steve Buscemi narrates the official audio tour, which includes stories from former guards, wardens, and prisoners. Every October, the site hosts Terror Behind the Walls, one of America's most extreme haunted house attractions. Actors in horror makeup chase visitors through the actual cell blocks. But many visitors report that the real scares happen when they're alone in the quiet areas, far from the Halloween festivities. The question everyone asks is simple. Is Eastern State Penitentiary really haunted? The prison doesn't officially claim to be haunted. The staff focuses on historical education and prison reform discussions. But they can't deny the hundreds of consistent reports from credible witnesses. Guards who worked there in the 1960s told the same ghost stories that visitors tell today. Different people in different decades describing identical experiences in the same locations. That's harder to explain away. Maybe it's the power of suggestion. You walk into a creepy old prison, you expect to feel scared, so your brain creates experiences that aren't real. Or maybe 142 years of suffering, isolation, madness, and death really did leave something behind. Energy, spirits, echoes of the past trapped in stone and steel. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. Eastern State Penitentiary changed the world of criminal justice forever. Its revolutionary design influenced over 300 prisons worldwide. Its harsh methods sparked debates about rehabilitation versus punishment that continue today. And its dark legacy reminds us that good intentions can create living nightmares. The prison sits in Philadelphia's Fairmount neighborhood at 22nd Street and Fairmount Avenue. You can visit it today, walk through the cell blocks, peek into Al Capone's cell, and stand at the entrance of Willie Sutton's escape tunnel. Tour guides will tell you facts and dates and architectural details, but they probably won't tell you about the cold spots or the shadows or the feeling that something is watching you from the darkness. Because some things you have to experience for yourself. So if you're brave enough to visit America's most haunted prison, go ahead. Just don't be surprised if something follows you home. Image Generations.